tell you a story. I worked on the 78, North Richmond to St Kilda. Got on one morning at 5:30. So there were several ladies sitting there. And we said, night ladies. Connie, if we'd had a good night, we wouldn't be on the bloody tram. We'd be going home by Rolls Royce. Wouldn't we, girls? That was my first introduction to the ladies of the night. So we saw all different aspects of society. It would change. The waterside workers would get on at 6 o'clock. The factory workers at 6:15. The school kids at 8 o'clock. The office workers at 8:15. The pensioners hurrying out at 9:30. And then the whole thing would reverse. Pensioners would be hurrying home at 3 o'clock because their tickets were invalid after 4. School kids at 3:30. Waterside workers and factory workers at 4. Office workers at 5. And then the ladies of the night at 7 o'clock were going out in great anticipation.
A tramway employee, we've found, serves you better when his leisure time is well provided for. So, of course, there are plenty of canteens and clubs at the depots. May we introduce Mr. R.J. Risson, chairman of the Tramways Board.
Nothing, of course, just happens, or if it does, it probably happens wrongly. A great deal of pre-planning is necessary. At present, the board has upwards of 4,500 employees, most of them, of course, in uniform, but quite a large number not in uniform, backing them up. And it could do with another 200 or 300 right now.
Every station was staffed in those days. The smaller station had a station master who did all duties, selling tickets, maintaining the toilets even, operating the ticket office, signalling the trains with flags, and dealing with passengers' queries. The tramways were asking for students to work as conductors, and I was a student at the time. I was doing a degree in psychology and social work. As one of my uni friends said, well, there's your counselling room. I was amazed by the older conductors, how well they related to passengers. People viewed the conductor as a non-threatening person. From 10 o'clock onwards, the life stories would come out. Well, I didn't try to be a psychologist, I was still a conductor. So I guess the listening side of psychology became very important to me. And also empathy. We take for granted what people's lives are like, but in their own environment, which they consider the tram to be, they would open up. They felt safe on a tram. The ambience was there. We were not considered a threat. We were part of the furniture, part of the fabric.
Fitzroy shopping strip. Mixture of old and new. Still got Maria's Coffee House, maybe your Food Town, Nicholson Street.
I was drawn by that sort of mixture of the diversity, sort of its old working class traditions, through to the modern era where you had young people that had been travelling, that had joined up and loved mixing it in amongst the jungle of humanity.
St Vincent's Hospitals. We may change here for tram numbers 911 to West Preston.
And you had a mob of eccentrics as well that liked entertaining. It was a safe, secure job, working class wage, but reasonably paid if you did a little bit of overtime.
We never in the past considered that a totally self-service system with fair payment, essentially on an honesty system, would actually made sense. We invite people to travel without paying their fare, and then we have these hide and seek patrols in plain clothes or in uniforms or whatever that are about catching people on odd occasions and then making some money in fines to try and offset the tens of millions of dollars a year we're losing to fare evasion. And it's not the best way to run the system in our view. The staff member that you meet on public transport is likely, more often than not, to be a ticket inspector demanding to see your ticket and flashing a badge at you, and not someone who's offering to help you. You can design a system with appropriate staffing to do that, but we have not tried in Melbourne, and so we rely instead on catching people out. It's really more honest in a way when you have regular staff as a pervasive presence on the system that are watching people to ensure they're assisted and to ensure they're supported, but also to ensure that they're actually paying their way as well.
I was on a train recently and somebody had their feet not really on the seat but next to the seat, and 4 or 5 burly guys sort of descended on him and started producing this gobbledygook legalese to say, did he know he was breaking the rules? I can't repeat what they said, but it was very complicated legalistic language that they were using, and were really harassing him. And it just meant the whole atmosphere in the carriage was really unpleasant, you know, and that sort of thing adds up.
I don't think it's fair that you're turned into a criminal by what's a very simple offence. It might not even be an intentional offence.
I don't know why they'd get a bad rap, because, I mean, they're there to do a job. I mean, how would it be if they weren't there? Then nobody would be paying for fares, would they? Then where would the cost go?
If we automate everything has to be economised on, everything has to be utterly efficient.
I've had a fine or two for not having a ticket or having feet on seats and stuff, but no problems, just a little chat. Sort of hoard you a bit sometimes, but it's fine.
On my railway station, there is a lockup, basically. It's madness. I mean, what are we doing having men with guns on our railway station when it worked quite reasonably in the past, where there were people who were there to basically sell you tickets? I mean, they must be spending almost as much money, if not more. It's not our public space anymore.
The thing that we've lost is the public contract, the social contract, and once you've lost that, it's hard to rebuild. Conductors on trams, I mean, perhaps have a little bit of a rosy glow about them, but really what it meant was that there was somebody to help you, and there's that sort of almost nostalgia for that time when things were a bit simpler. Privatisation, I think, was another layer, and it came alongside a lot of privatisations in water and power, and a government that was really punitive in the way it was dealing with public services. You know, public services had to pay their way. The public good started to be lost, and I noticed amongst my sort of middle class friends and acquaintances that there was a sense that if you didn't pay your fare, you were actually standing up against changes that you didn't like. It was a way of expressing your disapproval. You could get rid of conductors. There's no conductors on a lot of European trams, but the whole system is set up with an idea to be more friendly. One of the things that's different in the European situation is that while they do have contracts between authorities and state and municipal governments and operators, the operators are all wholly owned subsidiaries of the municipal or local state governments. So all the staff see themselves as public servants in some way. And when you combine that with the sort of German-speaking Europe sense of what public service might mean, which hasn't been eroded so much by neoliberalism, then you get a very different atmosphere to when you have a private company whose loyalty legally, financially, is to the shareholders. It's actually costing us a lot more to run the system than it did when privatisation started. The subsidies have almost doubled, really, in real terms over that time. The obstacles to bringing it back into public hands, while they're not financial, they're political. I mean, we still own all the rolling stock. It's not like the power where we've sold Hazelwood and we can't close it down because we've got a private operator. We can bring it back into public ownership, but you'd have to have the political will to build a public structure that could run our system on a European model.
Well, I was approached by someone who had a colleague who had been summoned by the Marquee people, and when I looked at it I thought, well, that looks pretty unfair, and I don't like seeing unfairness that's become institutionalised. And the more I looked at it, the more obvious it was that a lot of people are being prosecuted quite unreasonably in relation to the Marquee system. In the first of these cases, they provided us with a printout of the touch-on machine where my bloke reckoned he had touched on. Card A touches on at 8:15 and 32 seconds. Card B touches on at 8:15 and 32 seconds. Card A touches on again at 8:15 and 32 seconds. Card B touches on again at 8:15 and 32 seconds. I think there's no real-world circumstances that would justify that. So I think the equipment may be faulty. The person thinks they've touched on it and they can't open the gates because the touch on didn't work and the touch off doesn't work. They ask for help, they're escorted through an exit and handed over to the public transport officers, who then ignore everything they say and offer them a $75 on-the-spot fine, and they warn them that if they want to resist it, it'll be a couple of $100 if they go to court. But most people, the idea of going to court is going to cost them a day off work. If they want to get a lawyer, it'll cost them a day off work plus a lot. And $75 looks like a cheap way out. Now, if you are being persuaded to pay up because the alternative is too expensive, that's a standover racket. The famous, notorious Stanley Milgram experiments in America in the 1950s show that most people are capable of becoming bullies if they're placed in a position of power in relation to people who are relatively weak. Bullying behaviour just emerges. You know, people use the power they've got because they've got it.
All right, let me stand up. Let me stand up at least. No. Let me stand up. Why not? How have I assaulted you? I haven't fucking touched you. You're touching me. Oh my fucking God. What are you trying to do? Fucking get off me. Alright, let me stand up at least. Alright, hold me up when I'm standing at least. Scraping my back. Yes, I will fucking behave. No, you fucking dogs! Hey! Pull it up! This is the library! I don't care how much I just pulled it in! Pull it for the fucking bar!
A lot of people are in difficult circumstances, and we're becoming increasingly hard to the idea of other people's difficulties. That's a pity. I think the world was a little bit kinder and more personal when I was growing up. Well, you know, my biggest experience of commuting was when I was going to school, and it used to be a threepenny ticket and you'd get the same group of conductors over the course of a week or a year, and they all had their own particular foibles, and some of them were nice and some of them were just average. But they were people, you know, people dealing with people.
You know the wooden body trams that are sitting here? Just take them to the tram to the depot. And we were always
The tram driver would drive and she put me in there.
Really? You travel up and back while she was on the shift?
That's right.
Yeah, where Mum was a fantastic place, Brunswick.
She loved working there. That was just her favourite job.
Come on, girls, all aboard. We can't wait all day.
What's going on? I don't know how much I pay for a trip. You know, you swipe your card and I don't understand what I pay. When I'm on and when I'm off. You're going, can you come back again?
We'll be coming back on the return trip.
I reckon they should bring them back. Yeah, seriously. Hey? To make public transport more friendly, to cut out fare evasion. Yeah. And to prove that, you know, people can be much safer. They wouldn't have to worry about being attacked by anybody and all that. Seriously, yeah.